All right, well, my name is Zach. I'm the director of the Graduate Student Legal Aid Office. You may have seen me at one of your orientations, or you may have seen Debbie, who was out in the hallway. We try to come to as many as we can, or maybe we missed you because sometimes they're all scheduled at the same time and we can only be in so many places at once. Today is one of the first workshops of the semester for us. We run weekly workshops every Tuesday at 12:30. Some of them are going to be in person like this, where we'll give you free lunch. Other ones will be online on Zoom so that it's easier for you to attend based on your schedule. Today, we're talking about how to get a Maryland driver's license, which we're going to run through a few different scenarios that deal with whatever your circumstances may be. You've never had a license before, you have a license from another state in the US, or you have a license from a country that is not the US. So we're going to run through each scenario and figure out what each of you may need to do based on your own circumstances. If we could just save the questions until the end, we'll have plenty of time for Q&A. And also, because it's a little bit complicated, different parts, the answer might be on the next slide. So we'll try to answer things at the end unless I misspeak and you just can't understand what the heck I'm talking about. So let's start with the Maryland Motor Vehicle Administration, the MVA. The MVA is the agency in the state of Maryland that's in charge of giving you a driver's license or a learner's permit. They're also, if you own a vehicle, they're in charge of titling your vehicle, giving you license plates from the state of Maryland, and a bunch of good stuff like that. Their main website here is the mva.maryland.gov. You can find all the information that we're going to cover today. Almost everything is going to be on that website. It's actually been much improved over the last 6 or 8 years. And so they have a lot of helpful guides on their website that will answer the questions for you. Everything now through the MVA is appointment only. You can no longer show up to the MVA and just walk in and wait in line. It's actually been a fantastic turn of events. The Maryland MVA and a lot of state MVAs in the US used to have a reputation for being terribly run and terribly inefficient. And you would show up and wait for hours and hours and hours and then finally get called. The last time I was at the MVA, I scheduled an appointment ahead of time. I showed up, I got my little number to check in. I sat down, and 3.5 minutes later, I was called to speak to someone. And that is maybe not the closest experience, but wait times for your appointment are usually closer to 15 or 20 minutes, as opposed to 10 years ago when it was 60 to 90 minutes. So you have to pre-apply, you have to go on, create your own account, and schedule everything online. If you are an international student, I'm going to show you this slide again later. The SAVE verification process is something you're also going to need to do ahead of time. If you schedule an appointment to get a learner's permit, to get a driver's license, and you show up and you have not pre-submitted your documents, then they will essentially just accept your documents and say, okay, go schedule another appointment, because they can't automatically verify your I-20, your I-94, your passport. And so it usually takes them 2 to 5 business days to do that. So you're going to pre-submit through this and then schedule your appointment. You can kind of do it all at the same time, because you can schedule an appointment a week out, 2 weeks out, and you can pre-submit this. We're going to email you all this information as well so that you'll get the slides. But yeah, obviously feel free to take pictures now if you are impatient like I would be. The 2 closest MVA locations are in Beltsville, which is north of us. It's actually on Route 1 on Baltimore Avenue, which is one of the main roads that borders campus. If you go north for about a 20-ish minute drive, depending on traffic, you will find it on the left-hand side in Beltsville. The other one is in White Oak, which is west of us towards Silver Spring. The rumor is that White Oak is slightly more efficient. As I said, everything in the MVA is much more efficient than it used to be. It has much better customer service. But some people report that White Oak is a little friendlier or just a little bit quicker. But honestly, I think in this day and age, if whichever one you can get a quicker appointment to, I would probably just take that one. They're both about 20-ish minutes away, depending on traffic. Who needs to get a Maryland driver's license? Well, if you want to drive in the state of Maryland, you probably need to get a Maryland driver's license. This slide is about a technical description of the legal terminology of resident. It seems like a resident should just be anyone who resides in a place. That's not always the case. And so you may not need a Maryland driver's license if you do not reside in Maryland and you have a license from another US state or another country. That's pretty simple. Like you live in Washington, DC. You should not get a Maryland driver's license. You should get a Washington, DC driver's license. You live in Northern Virginia. Same thing. Can't get a Maryland driver's license unless you live in Maryland. You are a resident of another US state. There's a little bit of a technicality if you're an out-of-state student where you can maintain your residency in that other US state or territory. Maybe it's for tax purposes that they have lower income tax and you still have a business back there. Maybe you own a home there and your property taxes will stay lower if you keep your residency in that state as opposed to changing it to Maryland. There could be lots of reasons why you want to do that. But if you are maintaining your residence in another US state, then you cannot and should not get a license for the state of Maryland. If you have an out-of-country license and you're only going to be in Maryland for 1 year, then you can also keep your out-of-country license if you want. We're going to talk about that in a bit. I would recommend you probably didn't, but in theory, from a legal perspective, you can if you're only going to be here for 12 months or less. That's the non-resident privilege to drive, where we will honor out-of-state licenses or out-of-country licenses, but there are some terms and conditions. We're going to start with out-of-state license because honestly, it's the easiest one. So we'll knock this out of the way first. If you have a license from another state in the United States, then all you have to do is essentially apply to have it converted, is the short answer. So if you have a valid license from another US state, you're able to keep that kind of as we just talked about, that if you have your primary residence there, you still maintain a home there, you sort of have that as your IRS mailing address, or your family still lives there, it's a family home that you're using as that address. Even if you have a bona fide connection to your home state, you can still choose to become a Maryland resident. Even if all those things apply, you can choose to switch your residency to the state of Maryland if you were planning to live here longer term, or even if it's just for the length of your program. Depending on your situation, you might want to consult a tax specialist if you own property there or something like that. If you don't, then there's no real benefit to keeping your home state residency. All applicants for Maryland driver's license are checked with the National Driver Registry. So if your license is suspended or revoked in your home state, they're not going to give you a license here in the state of Maryland. You're going to have to deal with that back home first. You're going to have to go through the process to apply to have it reinstated after the suspension period is over or the revocation period is over. If you've gone past the time when it has been revoked and they'll let you apply for a new one, you could choose to apply in the state of Maryland. But a lot of times other states or even in Maryland, they might have sanctions where we're revoking your license and you cannot reapply for 5 years. And so you can't reapply to another state within that 5 years. They're going to keep that timeline running and respect the sanctions that you got in the other state for whatever crazy stuff you did to get your license revoked. Converting an out-of-state license. You're supposed to convert within the first 60 days of residency. So within the first 60 days of moving to the state of Maryland, you're supposed to schedule your appointment with the MVA, apply to have a new license from the state of Maryland issued to you. As long as your license is still valid or has been expired for less than 1 year, it's a pretty easy process. All you have to do is pass a vision test. That's all they're going to make you do. You set up the appointment, you go in, right there at the little desk with the person you're talking to, there's going to be a little box you lean your face up against and look in. They're going to ask you for some letters or numbers and all that stuff if you've ever had a vision test like this before. And as long as you pass it, they're going to give you a license. If you have a learner's permit from another state and then you moved here, they're not going to convert that to another learner's permit. You're going to have to start the process over and reapply for the learner's permit, which is going to be a knowledge test and a vision test. And we're going to get to that later for those who don't have a license. But if you do not have an actual license from that other state, you're not going to be able to convert it to a license here in Maryland. If you have the out-of-state license that has been expired for longer than a year, instead of just the vision test, they also make you take the knowledge and driving test. So we're going to get to those things in just a moment, but the knowledge test is just what you would expect. It's a written test, or I think it's on a computer now, where they give you questions. You have to get a certain score on it. based on the rules of the road. And then the driving test is you're actually in a car, somebody from the MVA will get in the car with you and tell you to do certain things. It may be to drive in a little course and make sure that you can park and you can have a turn signal when you need to have a turn signal, and you can turn around. And then or it could be a road test depending on which location you go to. But you're gonna have to pass those things if you've been expired for more than a year for your out-of-state license. If you have an out-of-country license from your home country, as I mentioned before, it is valid for up to 12 months. You can drive in the state of Maryland for up to 12 months with your home country license if it is in English. And if not, you have to get a certified translation of it with certified translation. There's a list of places that the Maryland certifies of the translation services that are certified. And you have to have that translation, the certified translation, with you at all times. So if your home country license is in English, great, you can just use that for 12 months. If it's not, then you have to have that certified translation with you at all times. Maryland does not respect international driving permits, which is a slightly different situation. It's not issued actually from your country. Usually they are issued from a private organization that may be authorized by your country. Like here in the US, if we have a US license from a state, there are some countries that make us get an international driving permit, and you can apply through the state of Maryland. The authorized issuer is AAA, which is like an automotive agency who, long story short, an IDP does not carry any weight in the US. You have to have a license issued from your home country. Talking about the 12 months, it is important to know that in many cases, the police will not check how long you've been in the country. They're not going to look at your passport stamps. They're not going to call someone at USCIS. They're not going to call ISSS on campus here to verify how long you've been here. They're just going to give you the ticket, and they're just going to say, we'll see you in court. If that happens, let me know. I will give you the information that you can take to court to explain, I'm an international student. I've been here for less than 12 months. I'm legally allowed to drive. All the students who that has happened to, and it happens to 4 or 5 students every year, will get it dismissed. So it won't cause any problems, but you're still going to stress about it. You're still going to be frustrated that you have to go show up in court because there's no way to sort of proactively get it dismissed. You have to show up in court and go speak in front of a judge. So it is strongly encouraged that you get a Maryland driver's license as soon as you can. You may be asking yourself, why is that in Comic Sans? It's because you write important things in Comic Sans. Don't really do that. It's to get your attention. Make sure that you consider this and consider the frustration that may be involved if you don't get it. I don't know what the reputation for law enforcement is for if you're an out-of-country student, an international student. I don't know what their reputation is in your country. They tend to be frustrating to deal with in the US. Not everybody, but a lot of them. Even the getting pulled over, even them harassing you and writing you a ticket for driving without a license is going to be an experience that I don't want you to have to go through. So that's why we are strongly recommending that you get your license from the state of Maryland as soon as you can. How do you do that? Unfortunately, they give you a few more hoops to jump through than they do someone from that has an out-of-state license. You still have to pass that vision screening, which takes 45 seconds, but you also have to take the knowledge test. You have to take the driving test, and they make you take a 3-hour course about drug and alcohol education. That is offered by private companies that you have to pay for, but you can do it online. It's not complicated, but it's just a fee that you're going to have to deal with. What you mainly get out of if you have a home country license and out of country license is you can skip what is called driver's education. Driver's education, as we're going to talk about in a moment, is something that you must go through if you've never had a license before. It requires 30 hours of classroom time and 6 hours of driving time with a certified instructor from that driving school. And it costs $400 or $500. So you get out of that, but you still have to take the knowledge test and the skills test and the 3-hour course. If you are from Canada, France, South Korea, Germany, Taiwan, or Japan, you don't have to take the knowledge test or the skills test. All you have to do is take the vision screening and the 3-hour drug and alcohol education course. So it's a little bit simplified because we have reciprocity agreements with those countries. I don't know in this day and age why we haven't done it with more than those 6 countries. It seems like we should have, but unfortunately we haven't. This is the link to the website of the MVA that has all the information you need to convert an out-of-country license. So for the impatient people who didn't want to wait for our email, there's a QR code if you want to look at that information immediately or in the next day or so. All right. What documents do I need to convert my out-of-country license? You need proof of age or proof of identity. You need a lawful presence document. You need your SSN, or most likely a letter of ineligibility, and you need proof of Maryland residence. The MVA website has a really, really helpful portal, this interactive portal at this link. If you click this link, it'll go and you say, it'll ask you, what are you applying for? You're going to say, I'm applying for a driver's license because you have an out-of-country license already. They're going to say, are you a US citizen? You're going to say, no. Do you have permanent residency? No. Do you have temporary status? Yes. You're going to click that, and they're going to go through each one and say, here are the things you need proof of age and identity. Here are your options. You click which one you have. It's going to be your passport. Hopefully you haven't lost it yet. Then they're going to ask about lawful presence. You're going to have your documents from USCIS. Then they're going to ask you about SSN or letter of ineligibility. Oh, this is the reminder. These are the documents that you're going to want to pre-submit, because these are the documents that they're not going to be able to verify at your little appointment. But it's a pretty straightforward process. You upload it through the portal. Then if you don't hear from them within 5 business days, you email them. It used to be 2 business days. They're a little bit slower now. Within 5 business days, they will contact you to tell you either we have your documents and they're approved, we have your documents and there's something missing, or we have your documents but still pending. Those are kind of the 3 things that you will hear from. And then obviously the last option, usually they will tell you how much longer it's going to take, or they'll tell you to follow up with them. That's the email address that you should follow up to if you don't hear from them within 5 days, or if they tell you it's going to take more time and you haven't heard back. The SSN, letter of ineligibility. So this is a social security number letter of ineligibility. You would think that you could just tell them, I do not have a social security number and I'm not eligible for it. But unfortunately, that's not how it works. You have to apply for a social security number and then be told by the Social Security Administration, you're not eligible. And then you take that letter as proof that you are not eligible for a social security number. Some of our international students, occasionally, depending on their status, maybe have a social security number already. Almost all of you do not. And so you would have to go through this process to verify your ineligibility to work in the US, your ineligibility to be issued a social security number. You have to schedule an appointment with the local Social Security Administration office. You take these documents through, you do it through the ssa.gov. You need your passport, your F1, your I-20, and your I-94. And so you apply with those documents. Then you just wait because you know you're going to be ineligible, and they mail you a 1-page sheet that says you're ineligible. Now you have that document and you can use it for this. There's a couple other things depending on how long you stay in the US and what your plans are that you might use it for. And you only have to do it once, which is nice, even though doing it at all is still frustrating. ISSS, which if you're an international student, you know what I'm talking about. They have a guide for how to do this as well on their website if you need slightly more information. If you have never had a license, that puts you into the most complicated category because you have to do everything. This also applies for those of you who may have a learner's permit from out of state or from your home country. If your home country has that learner's permit, then full license system, and Maryland will not respect your learner's permit, you kind of start over from the beginning and go through this process. It's a 3-step process. The provisional, depending on your age, probably doesn't mean much. It's essentially a full license, but we'll get to that in a moment. If you do not have a driver's license, you must first obtain a learner's permit. To get it, you must pass the vision test and the knowledge test. The learner's permit knowledge test comes in, I think, like 16 different languages, the handbook, the study guide for it. You can get them all on your website. If you just want to look at the English version, you can use the QR code. But if you would like to read it and study it in your first language or any language, if you're would prefer to do that because you're that type of person, then check their website. They have a whole bunch of different options for you. They also have online practice tests where you can see and make sure that you're scoring in the range that you need to score. So it's just helpful. They have different versions of it. You can take like an untimed version just so you can see the types of questions, or they actually can give you a timed version so that to make sure that you're moving along quickly enough. And that's on their website as well. I guess this is also helpful. Now that I think about this, I should move this up to the out of country section as well, because the out of country also has to take the knowledge test. When you have a learner's permit, this is the difference between a learner's permit and a real license. You always have to have a supervising driver in the car with you. You are not able to drive by yourself with a learner's permit. I understand that it is difficult for international students or even out-of-state students who have no friends or family in the area to find the person that is over the age of 21 and has had a license for at least 3 years to be that supervising driver. There's not really a good solution for you. You just need to find a friend who's willing to do it, or because the only other option is you pay someone from your driver's education school to do it, and that gets very expensive very quickly because you need to have at least 60 hours of driving time with a supervising driver. And if you're paying someone by the hour, it will add up quickly. So every time you drive, you need that supervising driver in the car with you when you have your learner's permit. Your learner's permit can be valid for up to 2 years if you're not in a rush to get your license. But for international students, they're going to sync it up with your current legal status, the end date that you are legally allowed to be in the country. I know that many of you might be renewing those documents in the future, but at this point in time, they're probably going to put it 1 year out, or sort of next summer, whenever your documents say that is your current status. After you receive your learner's permit, there are 3 things you must do before you can apply to have a provisional license and a full license. The first I mentioned earlier, which is driver's education. The second is to drive 60 hours with that supervising driver. It can be different people every time, but you have to have a supervising driver. They just write in your logbook that they give you, and they just sign it to say they did it. And then you have to have a clean driving record for a certain period of time, which depends on your age. If you are under the age of 18 and you're a prodigy starting a graduate school program, then you have to wait 9 months before you can switch from a learner's permit to a full license in the state of Maryland. Or if you're older, but during your learner's permit time, you get a moving violation. So a moving violation is any sort of ticket or citation that deals with you moving. So it's usually speeding, reckless driving, hopefully not a DUI, driving while under the influence. If you get in an accident and you're at fault, in some cases, if the police show up, they may issue you a ticket for that as well. In other cases, if the police don't show up, or even if they do and they can't determine who's at fault, or they weren't there at the time, they won't issue you a ticket. They'll just let your insurance figure it out. But if you get that moving violation while you have a learner's, you get bumped into the 9-month category. If you are 19 to 24 and you go 3 months without a moving violation, then you can, at that point, you are eligible to apply for the provisional license. Or if you are 25 or older, you only have to wait 45 days. What is driver's education? Driver's education is a course that you can do in person or online, depending on the school, but it is privately run in the state of Maryland. The businesses and the driver's education schools are certified by the MVA, but they are not the MVA. The University of Maryland does not offer this course. You have to go through a private company to do it. You can find the link of private companies on the MVA website or when we send you these, but you have to go through them. It costs between $350 and $500 generally. You're probably not going to see cheaper than $350, but you might see more expensive than $500. It all just depends on where you go and what they offer. Some circumstances, they may be offering you more than the 6 hours of driving time. Other times it'll just be the 30 classroom and the 6 hours that are required by law. Sometimes they offer you more, or you can click a box to get extra hours with that certified driving instructor, but it's not required. There are lots of options in College Park, in Hyattsville, and Greenbelt, Beltsville, Silver Spring, wherever you're living, there will be one in your town because there are hundreds of them in the state. When you get your learner's permit, you're going to receive a logbook where you have to log 60 hours of driving time with that supervising driver. It has to be someone over the age of 21 who has been licensed for at least 3 years. Every time you drive, you have to have that person in the car with you, or a person who meets those qualifications, or else you will get a ticket and it will be problematic. A provisionals license. After you have had your learner's permit for 9 months, 3 months, or 45 days, depending on your age, and you've completed driver's education, the 30 classroom hours and the 6 hours of driving time, and you've driven your 60 hours with a supervising driver and filled out your logbook. At that point in time, you can now take the driving skills test to try to get your license. You must provide the car for your driving skills test. It doesn't have to be your car, but you must provide it. If it is a rental vehicle, your name has to be on either as the renter or as an authorized driver. So if you're renting it for the day or just a couple days, your name has to be on that contract because they want to make sure that you're legally allowed to drive the vehicle. If it's not a rental vehicle, you can borrow a friend's car and it's usually not a problem. So, but you have to provide it. It is taken with the MVA staff, where you may be driving through a closed course, you may be driving on the road. They will get in the car with you. They will tell you everything you need to do. You just listen to them. If you look in the driving handbook, it'll tell you exactly the elements that they're going to ask you to do. You just do them, you follow it, you drive safely, and hopefully you pass. But failing happens. It is not uncommon for people to fail the driving skills test the first time. There is no real penalty to fail the driver skills test other than they make you wait a day to take it. If you fail twice, you have to wait a week. They're essentially telling you go practice some more. And what? It never gets more than a week. So, but that's how long you have to wait to retake the test. There's no additional requirements. Like if you actually didn't practice on the in-between, there's nothing that, there's not a new logbook that you have to fill out, but they will force you to wait. And there's no there are people who fail. It doesn't mean you're a bad driver. It just means you had a bad day. The restrictions on a provisional license are age-based. And for the most part, most of our graduate students, it doesn't really have a huge impact. If you're under the age of 21, you may not drive with any measurable alcohol in your system. The drinking age is 21 in the state of Maryland anyway, so it's not very different, but it can have implications on your license if you are caught with a DUI or DWI, and that's even with the lower standards. So there are standards for 0.08% when you're talking about your blood alcohol content, but if you blow anything above a 0 and you're under the age of 21, you can face repercussions with your provisional license. If you're under the age of 18, the restrictions are on the other passengers in the vehicle. You may not drive with others that are under the age of 18 unless they're immediate family member for the first 151 days, unless you have that supervising driver. And then additionally, you may not drive between midnight and 5 a.m. unless you have a supervising driver or you have documented proof that you're driving from a job or from a school activity. Studying doesn't count, but if you have an official activity. But again, that's only for people who are under the age of 18. So unless you are that prodigy starting a graduate student program, that's probably not you. Many of you may be prodigies anyway, but most of you aren't under 18 anymore. Your full license. How long do you need a clean record before you lose those potential restrictions that may not have actually been a big restriction if you're over the age of 21 anyway? you need to wait 6 months, or you need to wait 18 months if you've been previously licensed for 0 to 6 months. If you've been previously licensed for 6 to 12 months, you wait 12 months. If you've been previously licensed for 12 to 18 months, then it's only 6 months. So this is a little confusing. The latter number deals with a clean record. The first number deals with how long you've been licensed in total. It doesn't make the most sense, I know. That's just what they tell you. Okay. There are more resources on the ISSS website, on the MVA website, as well as one year somebody wanted to read all the actual code that governs this. And so I added this to the presentation, but I don't even want to read that. So I don't know why any of you who are not attorneys would want to read that. But that's the overview of all the things. What questions do we have? Or did I do a great job and not need any questions? In the back, sir. If you are converting an international license, you do not go through the provisional process in the same way.
Well, I directly get the normal license.
Yeah.
And also like for the driver's skill test, I'm converting international license, I need to go through that, right? And it says that if I'm renting a car, I need a contract, but if I'm renting a rent car, I don't need anything.
Yeah, they're still going to ask you for the registration of the vehicle to prove that it's not a rental car. But you can use a friend's car. But if it's a rental car, they just want to make sure you're legally allowed to drive it, so that it's not my friend rented it under their name and did not put me as an authorized driver, but I'm driving it anyway. They're going to say, no, we're not going to let you drive because you're not authorized to drive. In almost every rental contract, every rental contract, like the person who is the primary on it is going to be authorized to drive. But if that's not you and you have somebody else do it for you, then make sure that when they are applying or picking up the vehicle, that they add you on the policy as an authorized driver so that you're printed on the contract. And then you just bring that contract. It's just going to probably be like a 1-page thing that folds up. A lot of times it's on like old school printer paper, carbon paper sometimes, but just bring that with you to prove that you are authorized to drive that specific vehicle. In the past, I haven't heard any complaints if you don't bring the friend. But the law doesn't specifically say that they need to be there. So it's not my understanding that the friend needs to be there, but I will double check and make sure things haven't changed. And when we email out the slides, I'll make sure we put the answer to that question in there if your friend needs to be there. Okay.
So 6-hour driving that happens through the learning school, they don't provide you guys.
So the 6 hours of driving with the driver's education, so the question was, do they provide you with the vehicle? In a lot of cases, most driving schools will actually provide you with the vehicle when you are doing those 6 hours. So they have their own vehicle from the driving school. Most driving schools will also, because they know you don't have a license, you're not supposed to be driving somewhere, will come pick you up for that time slot. And so some schools do it differently, where they will give you like 3 2-hour, they'll schedule you with 3 2-hour blocks. Others might do 6 1-hour blocks, where they will say, you get, obviously it's something that fits into your schedule, and they will come pick you up for that time and then drive you around and then come drop you back off where you were. If that's a concern, that's why a lot of times people might pick a school closer to them if the school doesn't offer that service, to make sure that it's accessible and easy for you to get there. But a lot of schools will offer that service where they both provide the vehicle and they will pick you up so that you don't have to worry about getting there. Follow up?
Yeah, that logbook, is it an actual paper thing or is it online?
So the question is the logbook online or is it a paper thing? It used to be a paper thing. And as of a couple of years ago, it was still a paper thing because there's the person is supposed to sign off, your supervising driver is supposed to sign off on each little time that you drive. So you could go driving with somebody for a half hour and just log it and they sign it. And then it could be you drive with somebody for 3 hours and it can be any sort of combination, but it used to be paper. My understanding is it still is.
So if I recall correctly, you said that learner's permits don't carry over to other states.
Yeah.
So how about provisional licenses? Like, you get your provisional license, you still have that 18 or whatever month period to wait until it's permanent. But you end up moving states, so do you have to like completely restart?
It depends on, or if you're moving to another state outside of Maryland, it's gonna depend on what that state's laws are. So each state has their own laws for licensing for drivers. In most cases, I believe it will convert, but it might convert to a provisional license in their state, whatever their restrictions are for that. But I will also look that up and I can include that in the email that if you registered, you'll get the email.
But
You-
it's not like a learner's permit.
It shouldn't be like a
It's-
learner's permit where you start from nothing.
And just another question, so I think you said to convert the learner's permit into a provisional license, you need to fulfill the requirements and have 45 days or whatever time. Does the 45 days start counting once you've completed the requirements, or is that from the moment you're getting your learner's permit?
It's from when the learner's permit is issued. So when you first get it, that 45 days is when the clock starts. It's not after you complete. It's initially when the permit is issued. That's when the 45, the 3 months or the 9 months begins.
And just to follow up to that, so let's say, you get your learner's permit, 45 days pass, you may have not even set in a car. So you take that box, obviously no violations, then you start driving around with people, so you get involved in some sort of an issue. Does that influence that 45-day period?
Yes, and so it is, you have to, if you saying I didn't get anything in my first 45 days, but I didn't complete the other requirements, and while I was completing the other requirements, I received a citation, a moving violation, then yes, that would then push you into the longer category, because it's at the moment you have applied, have you essentially checked the boxes? They don't pre-check the box for you and then count it as completed. Which they just say, up until now, have you not had a moving violation, sort of at the point when you're applying? And they say that you could do that as soon as 45 days. But if you waited 75 days, we're gonna say, did you have a moving violation in that time? And if you did, they're gonna bump you into the other category. So yeah, I guess saying that it has to be checked off is not the clearest of descriptions.
Thank you.
Mhm.
It's about the provisional license wait time. I am one of the slowest people to understand those type of stuff. Can you repeat like how much gets this like, so what is the previously licensed mean?
And so it essentially means how long have you had the license? And so
Provisional.
if you have had the provisional license for a longer period of time, for 12 to 18 months, you don't have to have 6 months, you only have to have 6 months of clean driving. This also can apply for when you've been licensed in the past in a different place, or you've been licensed under a different system and maybe it lapsed and expired. And so they count more things into this first number. So if you are getting a new license and you have never been licensed before, you will sort of be on your provisional for 18 months.
A full clean record.
With a full clean record, yes.
Thank you.
Now, if you're over the age of 21, the provisional is essentially a full license because there's no restrictions for anyone over the age of 21. If you're 21 or if you're under the age of 21, then it's these restrictions that we talked about before. But over the age of 21, a provisional carries the same exact weight as a full license.
And so what I will need to do after 18 months is just go and update it to
Yep.
its full license. But technically, there is no like.
There's no additional tests or anything. It's just a waiting period.
So, I live in Virginia and I have an international license, so I will need to convert that international license in Virginia.
In Virginia, yes. And if you email us at glao@umd.edu, I can email you some resources specific to Virginia. And so just email us and I can send you Virginia's resources. The same goes for if you live in Washington, DC. I can email you those resources. A lot of it is the same, but it's more the sort of steps and where to go. Obviously, are going to be different, but it's the same documentation you're going to need to apply to verify your residency in the state of Virginia.
Then that license, I can use it for like driving in DC and Maryland.
Yep, and so once you have a license in the state where you're residing, you can drive anywhere in the entire US without a problem.
International driving license from the 6 weeks, where you don't need to take the test. You need to provide a translation if the license is not in English.
If it is not in English, then yes, you're gonna need a certified translation of your license.
Drug and alcohol test, you can take it before the appointment with the MBA, or because you have the appointment, it allows you to take the test.
You can take it before your appointment. And so for you're gonna wanna pre-submit your documents through the same verification process and then schedule your appointment, but you can before that, because your appointment is going to be trying to get the Maryland license. And so they're not going to give it to you until you have taken that course. And so you're going to want to take the course first, the 3-hour drug and alcohol education course, and then sort of have your appointment after that so that you have the certification that you've completed the course. And it's something you can do online.
That's why you like, engage with the process, or just like.
No, you don't have to previously engage with the MVA. You can just, because that's also run through private companies, similar to driver's education. And so you just need to take it. I would just double check the list with the MVA website to make sure it's one of the approved vendors, and then take that certification with you to your appointment. Yep. Yes, and so the drug and alcohol education course is not a test, it's just a 3-hour thing they make you sit through. The knowledge test is a test that is based on a handbook, and I can bring it up and show you the handbook, that is testing you on the rules of the road in the state of Maryland. And so it's talking about sort of when you, I guess there's also a video version of it now. But you'll see that it runs through the basics of what does a double yellow line mean? What, when can you turn left at an intersection? When can you not turn left at an intersection? What do the speed limits mean? They mean that they're limits on your speed. It's all pretty straightforward for the most part. But they will have little pictures of all the signs. They're going to talk about right of way, driving safely. That in some cases, even if the speed limit says 55, if it is snowing, you can still get a ticket for driving unsafely at 55, because they want you to be aware of the appropriate speed for the conditions, that if the officer thinks that it was unsafe. In most cases, if it's not a monsoon or thunderstorm, or it's not a snowstorm, everything is going to be fine. So yeah. What does a red light mean? What does a yellow light mean? What does a green light mean? So a lot of it will feel very simple. And it's just to make sure that you understand the basics of driving in the state of Maryland. It's not the knowledge test. A lot of people don't fail unless they try to take it in a language that they're not familiar with, or they literally never looked at this handbook at all. So in most cases, all of you as graduate students have performed very well and on testing at some point in your life, or well enough to make it through. So I don't foresee you having any issues with this if you take the time to read it and understand it better. And the other course, so there's also not any testing. If you have to take the driver's education course or the drug and alcohol, those aren't like tests, they're just classes. The only test is the knowledge test. And then the other non-academic test is the driving skills test, where they will want to see you park. They're going to want to see you turn around safely. They're going to want to see you like stop completely at a stop sign. They're going to want to make you make a right turn and a left turn and put your signals on that you're turning left and turning right. So it is very basics of driving. You will likely, yes, you will need a driver's license to rent a car. Depending on the company, some of them will allow you to rent with an out-of-country license and some of them won't. It's their own personal choice as to what they want to do.
One car and do the test. So how can we manage that situation?
So you would just make sure that you're listed as authorized drivers. And so in some cases, say that. So a lot of rental car companies might charge you a premium if you are younger, because younger people are more reckless in general and are prone to more accidents. So if one of you is 28 and two of you are 22 and you're thinking, we're gonna drive somewhere on vacation for the weekend, you might think, I'm not gonna tell them that the 22-year-old is gonna be driving because I don't want them to charge me more. So theoretically, the 22-year-old should not be driving the vehicle at all. When you are going to do your rental vehicle, if you want to if you're planning to take the driving test, you need to tell them that they will be driving and make sure that they put their full name and they spell it correctly on the rental contract. And so they'll just be primary driver, and there will be they'll either call it secondary drivers or they'll say authorized drivers. And you just need to make sure that anyone who's taking the test with that vehicle has their name on that contract as being authorized to drive. Usually, so when you rent a car, it'll be included within the insurance should be included within that. You should pay for the insurance if you don't have a separate vehicle or a separate insurance policy for you that covers your driving everywhere. In some cases, your credit card, if you have a credit card in the US, provides car insurance coverage, but in a lot of cases it won't. So you'll want to pay for the insurance through the rental car company. No, you can take them at different offices. And so it's whenever the schedule is available, you can kind of work out the appointments.
Same verification request, like, should I do it before the knowledge or before the driving?
You're going to want to do that. The first thing you do should be to submit your documents through the save verification. And so you'll create the account online, then you'll submit, and then you'll set up the appointment for whatever the first step of the process is for you. But you're going to want to submit, if you're an international student, you're going to want to submit those documents ahead of time. Otherwise, they'll just accept your documents and say you need to schedule another appointment when we approve these.
So I heard that in New Jersey, like the driving process is much more similar than. I'm like wondering whether we can get a jail system convert that to driving.
Well, if you don't live in New Jersey, they're not going to give you a New Jersey driver's license. So if you live in New Jersey and you can prove your residency there, so one of the things they're going to tell you about proving your residency in the state of Maryland, you're going to have to show them a lease. You're going to have to show the mail that came to that address with your name on it. And so unless you actually live in New Jersey, that's probably going to be very difficult to do. If you do live in New Jersey, you could consider that. I'm not familiar with their system to know if it's easier or not. Yeah, and so if you live in New Jersey, you could do that, but if you don't, it might be hard. Yeah.
So I'd like to understand, you mentioned that you have another state license, and you only have 60 days to apply for American license. What do you think?
It's not that you only have 60 days, it's just the law says you're supposed to do it within 60 days. There's not a huge penalty if you do not. Because often they don't know when you actually move to Maryland. So just go through the process and apply anyway. It shouldn't be an issue.
So for the out-of-state exception of being able to keep your home state's license, for being a student, for a PhD student, does that still apply if you're not taking classes anymore and just doing research?
If you're still qualified as a student and the key thing is to maintain your residency in your home state, right? So I guess if you're not taking classes, you're probably not dealing with tuition, and a lot of times, depending on your stipend, you might have had remission for that. But if you were to try to transition over to in-state tuition and claim Maryland residency, and then that would disqualify you from trying to claim residency in your home state. But as long as you are still maintaining a bona fide connection to your home state, which is sort of that list from earlier, like you still have a mailing address there, whether you own it or not, you're still planning on paying your taxes there, all that stuff, it shouldn't be a problem to not convert, and you should be able to keep your home state license as long as you still view that as your primary residency.
And then that also keeping your home state residency, for my purpose for gun laws, does that not count you as a Maryland resident for the purpose of gun laws?
Well, if you're not a Maryland resident, then yes, it wouldn't, but if you're in the state of Maryland, the gun laws apply whether you're a resident or not.
Well, specifically, there's a law that if you're establishing residency within 90 days of moving, you have to register certain firearms. So if I keep my out-of-state residency, I don't have to do that.
I would have to look that up to verify, but if you email us and schedule an appointment with me, I can do that for you.
I got two more quick questions. So in terms of, driving either on learner's permit or provisional license, especially learner's permit, does that have to take place in Maryland, or like, can you actually venture into DC, Virginia? How does that work?
In theory, on a learner's permit, you can drive in other states. As long as you have that supervising driver. It shouldn't limit you just to the state of Maryland. You should be able to drive into DC, but it should be up to you.
And the second thing is, when it comes to the driver's education, the first 6 hours, do they actually dump you directly into traffic right at the very beginning?
No, because the driver's instructor doesn't want to be in the car with you in traffic. So a lot of times, the first time that you've ever been in a vehicle, even if you've driven before, but they don't know you, they're probably going to pick you up and drive you to a local high school that is not in session, that has a big empty parking lot, maybe even a big empty parking lot on campus, but they tend not to be empty on campus. So they're going to find like a school and have them prove to you that you can do some of the basics in the empty parking lot before they want you to go out into traffic.
Yeah, that's what I was referring to, like, try to do parking and whatnot before you do it, next to other people's cars.
Yeah, that's what they would do, unless they love living on the edge and potentially risking their lives.
Well, the same process you mentioned is valid, I guess, for the F2 dependent.
For F1 dependents, yes. Yeah, it's still valid for really any, it's not specific to F1. It's the very similar process for anyone. So if you're an out-of-state license, it's the same. It doesn't matter what your status is. If you're international, it's the same. If you're on any type of visa, F1, J1, any of the 75 other visa types, then it still apply, and dependents of those as well. Do they take your home license? They don't keep it, no. If you have an out-of-state license, converting it to Maryland because you're a Maryland resident here will terminate your out-of-state if you had one from another US state. If it's an international license from your home country, they will not do that. Or not even your home country, any country where you had the license. Yeah, they will not do that because there's no conflicting overlap of authorization to drive in the US.
There any cost or a fee?
There are fees to apply for the license, to apply for the learner's permit, and to get driver's education, but there aren't fees for the individual appointments. There's no specific fee. You're going to pay the fee to get your driver's license, and sort of the appointments that are required for that are part of that fee.
How long is this whole process going to take for an out of country conversion?
For the out of country, the longest wait is, so the process itself doesn't have a lot of wait time. The way that appointments have been, the last time I checked was like 6 months ago. You can usually get an appointment within 2 weeks or so. And it takes them about, as I said, 2 to 5 business days to process your documents. So it's not a huge, big, long process as long as you're passing all the steps along the way. Like, as I said, if you fail the driving test, you have to wait a day. If you fail it twice, you have to wait a week between each failure after that. And so that can slow the process down. But for out of country, when all you have to do is the vision, the knowledge, and the 3-hour course in the driving skills, there's not like a huge, big wait or anything. It's just about scheduling the different steps.
First step and second step on the same day.
The vision screening and the knowledge test you can do on the same day. A lot of times they won't let you, if my memory is correct, they won't let you do the driving skills test on the same day because in the system, they won't let you schedule that one until you have passed the knowledge. And so you would have to go do that and then go back and try to schedule it. So you might wait another week or two. But that should be the only delay. Is you'd think within a month or two at the most, that you should be able to get it.
The fourth step, can be done before the vision meeting or?
I believe so, yeah, I believe so that it can be done, because it can be done independently through the list. I thought I had the list on here, whichever the driver's education list was, it has the same. You can also get the 3-hour drug and alcohol program through that. In the back, can you say that one more time? You have a home country license, but you don't have a what? Yes, yes. So they're gonna make you get the ineligibility letter, and then you use that to apply. You submit it through the SAVE verification. So almost all of our new international students, probably 98% of you, are ineligible for a social security number. And so in that case, they just make you do the application, get the letter to say you're ineligible, and then submit to prove that you're ineligible. Yes, and so with your home country license, you can apply to set up for the knowledge test and the driving test. Yeah, you get to skip the whole driver's education thing. Yep,
So we also have to upload the, out of country license in the second line. When time.
if you haven't, you said you had you have another state license from another US state?
Oh, no, I'm talking about my dependent. She's an out of country, but out of country, she has an out of country license. So when I apply, you need to upload that also, for the platform, independent country license, right?
Yes, exactly. She'll need to upload that as proof of the out of country license so that she can skip driver's ed.
How much it costs and how much it takes to get like shouldn't be like.
There shouldn't be, no. And the only limit is if you're going through the learner's permit process and you're, you know, that you have to do it within 2 years. But that's really it.
If I have my, and once. That will be that OT, is always like, doesn't matter.
No, just whatever your current status, whatever your documents say is the last day you're allowed to be here,
That would.
then that's the date they're gonna put as the expiration on your permit or your license, and then it's just about renewing it. And so the way that when you get a license, they're charging you a fee. Typically, it's like for the 8 years that you would have it, but if you're only eligible for 1 or 2 years, they're gonna prorate the fee to just those 1 or 2 years.
So how does car rental work with either a learner's permit or a provisional license? According to what you said, I presume provisional license is not that much of a problem for them because it kind of say as almost a full license, but especially for learner's permit, because you know it's one thing to find someone to drive with you, it's a different thing to find a car to do that.
Yes, and that is a good question. The answer is going to be dependent on the private company. They can choose to rent to you or not based on your license status. And so it might be a problem is the short answer. That I haven't tried to do it personally. I can try to look into it and see if I can see what the policies are for sort of the major retailers. If you email me, then I can look that up and try to find it out for you, or find out if there are any like ones that allow for it that I can point you to.
Yeah, that would be great.
Great, and so just email us at the glao@umd.edu and I'll try to find the answer for you.
Right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
So I have this Carolyn's driver license, but it has expired.
Have a good day.
You too.
That's when I take my master's and I come back for a PhD. Also I completed the same verification, but I didn't get a response. Do I have to wait for them or I can just go ahead and schedule an appointment?
How long ago did you do the, let me turn off the recording real quick while we're